Hello and welcome to Sound Librarian. I'm Stefan Schutz. 1999 was an incredible year for video games. The original Silent Hill, Homeworld, Counter-Strike, Shenmue. There were very many very significant games that came out that year. But one in particular really defined a lot of where first-person shooter games were going to go. That game was System Shock 2. Now, System Shock 2, from a design point of view, had some really interesting things that it introduced. They moved far beyond just the basic concept of running and gunning, which was still something that is, up to these days, very popular. They introduced far more of a story element to the game. They introduced things like hacking, various different weapon skills, and also psychic powers. But in a lot of ways, System Shock 2 was actually more of a survival horror game than it was a plain shooter, even with the sorts of things like hacking and psionic powers. In the game itself, you spend a lot of your time with almost no resources and almost no health, and it came down to a choice of, will I use this next one bullet that I have left on this next enemy, or will I switch to some other way of avoiding or defeating the particular adversary? So the tension in the game was really quite high. It was also a very difficult game. This is back in the era where most games of this type were on PC, and they were traditionally far harder than a lot of the console games that are released these days. Now, from an audio point of view, System Shock 2 was incredible. In fact, I would argue from both an audio point of view and a design point of view, it was actually well ahead of its time. If you got System Shock 2 these days and the only thing you did to it was update the graphics to be pretty much state of the art, you would not need to change anything else for this game to be a very good quality modern style game. The reason why is because the atmosphere that's been created with the audio is outstanding. The use of the audio from a tactical point of view is very effective. And just generally, this game really introduces some narrative elements from an audio and a dialogue point of view that is really significant and frankly just downright scary. It is also one of the first games to introduce the whole idea of talking heads, so characters that you are exposed to via recordings. And in fact, really, System Shock 2 is the spiritual predecessor to the BioShock series. So really, this is a very significant game in a lot of ways. I would also suspect it had very heavy influence on games like Deus Ex as well. But today we're going to have a look at it and we're going to have a listen to the audio and see how even today the audio is still as outstanding as it was nearly 15 years ago. Let's have a look at System Shock 2.
Okay, so you can see very clearly that there's nothing spectacular about the graphics at all. System Shock 2 was released in 1999, so it's quite an old game. And yet, it doesn't stop it from being, in some cases, a very disturbing game. Quite frightening, very atmospheric. And I think that apart from the graphics, which are obviously somewhat dated, the rest of the game is as relevant right now as it was when it came out. The audio design and the actual game design and the level design and the interaction are all just as effective to play right now today in 2013 as they were when they came out. And this, I think, is quite astounding. Going backwards and forwards through that door then was just something that I noticed when I was capturing this, that even the door slides are panned to the right side. So depending on which way you're facing, the door will slide into the side of the wall on either your left or right hand side. Small little details like that are quite a big thing, especially in a game this old. What was significant about this game is that the time when this game came out, most first-person games did little more than allow you to shoot. This had quite a range of equipment and skills, the psychic powers you can see me using there, weapons, hacking, a skill tree, effectively. So this was really so much more complex than so many other games at the time. But from a sound point of view, it really is outstanding. Although perhaps walking around on metal surfaces is not the most exciting thing. What's outstanding about the sound in general is the atmospheres that are created. As you move around the different environments, you are exposed to quite a range of different entities, and in some cases the game is just really, really very, very difficult. And you can see the problem I'm having here is that I ran out of ammunition for my main gun, which was the best thing to kill this thing with, and I've had to revert to a different weapon which is not anywhere near as effective, so I'm having to use up a lot of ammunition here just to kill this creature. And this is what a lot of this game is about. You spend a lot of time on very low health with very little ammunition. So, because certain creatures are affected by certain types of weaponry, but are immune to others, you become very, very paranoid from the point of view of making sure you're using the right thing to try and kill the creatures. Now, this is where the sound is so important, because I realized that creature was going to attack me because I could hear it coming from a long way away. The audio in this game is your main method of surviving. Now, in a lot of cases, the reason why I'm dying is because I'm perhaps not very good at this game, but also this particular passage here is really, really quite difficult.
Is there another?
There are so many things that are potentially a threat to me. So it becomes this, you're becoming constantly harassed all the time. And so your senses are hyper aware because you're waiting for audio cues in all the case to let you know what's coming up.
Your colleagues
have managed to set up a transmitting station in the athletic sector of this deck. The transmitter is intended to send a message to the Earth to warn them of the events that have occurred in this ship. However, it will also draw power away from Xerxes, making him vulnerable to my will. Once you do this, I will control the primary data loop. The annelids are unaware of its presence, but guard the area for their own purposes. Find the transmitter and activate it.
Camera, monkey, fireball. All of that, I didn't see any of that through the door. All that information was presented to me through the sound. I heard the camera, I heard the monkey, I heard the incoming fireball. I really think Showdown is one of the best bad, nemesis characters that's been presented in a game. The whole concept is very cleverly done, but the voice manipulation is outstanding. And this game, being nearly 15 years old, I don't think I've heard as convincing a state of voice manipulation in a modern game. So whilst you're in this environment and you're feeling vulnerable and alone, you have got this really quite freakish computer voice that is basically demanding you to fulfill certain obligations for it. And it's just really, really quite creepy. So this game, I actually think in a lot of ways I play more of this game using my sense of sound than I do my visuals, because I find that the audio environment is providing far more information.
The eggs we found near the observation chambers are different from the ones in Hydro. They release some kind of disgusting flying swarming thingies. Bullets don't do anything. Bullets, for Christ's sake. I never even fired a gun before this morning.
Again, these entries are so simple, and yet that said so much about that character. I really think that the quality of the writing and the voice acting in System Shock 2 is very, very good. It really, really fills out the story very, very well. I would also suggest that the game design of System Shock 2 really was the inspiration behind so many things. Obviously the BioShock games, but I would suggest it is very, very likely that the designers of Deus Ex drew heavily from System Shock 2 as their influence, and a lot of other games that have introduced multiple sort of abilities, things like hacking and lockpicking and stuff. And I can actually hear in that other room there's actually a robot there as well. So much of what you do and how you do it is determined by, or I would suggest it should be determined by what you're hearing.
You seek your associates, but you cannot find them.
You are so bad.
To be one
Against the infinite.
think one of the most disturbing things about the creatures that you have to deal with in System Shock 2 is that it's made very, very clear to you that they were human. And in fact, some of their behaviour continues to be somewhat human. Having a zombie alien apologise to you as it attacks you is really, really quite disturbing in a lot of ways.
We do not welcome. Join us!
Your song
Is not ours. Your
The other thing is, because of how important the sound is and because of how well it's been implemented, I find myself quite often hiding around a corner, listening very closely for the movements of an opponent. And I can hear usually when the right point of time is to leap out and engage them. And when you're trying to conserve both your health and your ammunition, this is sometimes the difference between surviving or not surviving.
So I've just recently downloaded and played System Shock 2 again. Thankfully, it's now available again, so it'll work on Windows 7. It's been re-released. It's still the original game. Nothing has changed. They've just updated it so that it'll work on current machines. I find it just as tense as I always did, and frankly, just as scary as I always did, which I find even more impressive because the graphics are very obviously outdated, and yet the atmosphere of the game is just as relevant now as it always was. So I think it's very, very significant from a sound point of view. And as you can see, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the audio from the music, the dialogue, and the sound effects. Thank you very much for watching.